Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm Alice Hoffman, an indie comic and semi-realism artist. For today's paintover I got a submission from a mysterious anonymous artist. It's a neat anime hybrid style painting. Okay, let's get right to it. So Anonymous submitted this piece with a character in a war situation. They mentioned that there isn't a backstory for the character. So yeah, I'll have a guess, and yeah, the facial expression looks, yeah, obviously not like a character who is necessarily looking forward to the battle. But I wouldn't say necessarily that nervous either. Maybe it's just a very quiet character who doesn't show it very much. But I think overall the stance is still more defensive than ready for battle, so maybe it would be good to make that even clearer. So at the moment it is a very horizontal stance that doesn't really tell us much. Maybe it would be better to have the character sort of shield themselves with the spear. Yeah, so what I will do first is change the stance and also fix the anatomy along the way. So first of all, I will separate the arms and the weapon. So what I want to do is raise up the spear to be in, I'd say, this sort of line. This is a bit more obvious now. So I kinda see that you were probably trying to have a composition with the spears that goes like this. But I still think the main character having it be this, static is maybe not ideal. So I'll just give you the option of what it would look like with a raised spear, and then you can still decide for a future artwork if you like it better or not. Of course, this hand will have to change quite a lot. I think something like this could do the trick for the hand. Yeah, I think it also fits her expression quite well because it looks a little unsure. So let's just quickly render this hand. Just barely enough so it fits the rest. As you can see, first I'm blocking in the shapes. Then like rough shadows. So this will do, it's just to portray the idea. So a problem you had with the arms was that so the upper arms were a little bit longer than the lower ones. So this is the upper arm length, this was the lower arm length. So as you can see, this is quite a bit shorter than this. So I'll try to fix that now that I'm at it. Just stretching it out a little bit, probably all that's needed. And adding a little bend, because it's easy to forget that arms are slightly bent and not completely straight. So I still think the whole arm needs to be longer, because it should reach to waist level from up the shoulder. So this one will have to be extended. And I'll also change the angle of the lower arm a bit. I'll just fix up the spare. And you see, now that I've given it a lot more space, I think we have enough place here for a spare, what's it called, the point, the attack thingy, the thing you don't want you to meet. So yeah, or like whatever the weapon is. I mean, it could be a special weapon because like you made this character the main character of the image. So I don't know, if you want, add a little special jewel in a signature color. I mean, you know what would be cool, like her eye color. Let's just do this for this example. Doesn't have to be a thing, of course, if you don't want it to be, but it's a nice option in general to just have a certain point of interest. So her character design is already following the Hollywood rule of not giving the main characters a helmet. She has very nice armor, which I have to praise, because you didn't go the route of giving your female character a bikini. But yeah, she doesn't have a helmet, so she is obviously some sort of main character in this fantasy setting who has probably a special super weapon. So this is just a very, very quick suggestion. Maybe if you are doing a top like this, move it more in. I know it's probably not the correct way of holding the weapon if you are supposed to have it work in a war setting, but yeah. Later in the fight she can carry the weapon more properly, so she's just getting ready, so that's okay. So then here we want to elongate it. Okay, so we've got the stance. I hope it's clear what I mean. So now that the basic stance is adjusted, I can do some more anatomy adjustments because, yeah, the basics are now done. Okay, let's start with the face. Here I would suggest to move down the ears because they are set a little bit high up. They should generally line up with the corner of the eye, the outer one, and the nose, and you have the face in 3D perspective, of course, at all times. So in this case, you can imagine a line going somewhat like this, from the eye corners to the mouth, maybe even curved some more. Yeah, I'd say maybe like this. So it happens to a lot of artists that they place the ear too high on top, which is a problem I have very often still, which is why I'm doing exercise drills to really learn the anatomy of the head in all kinds of angles so that it doesn't happen to me anymore. It's really tricky because it's so easy to miss. So now we've got that. Yeah, also of course, good idea is to just flip the canvas every now and then. I hope it's clear what I mean with the ear. We can have a comparison with the before. So it was very high up and you had it more or less in a vertical line here. Good, we don't need this anymore. Then what I would also suggest is mildly moving in the chin and the cheek, because the cheek is going to be most pronounced if the 3/4 view is very strong and it's like not completely there. I think if you move the nose over a bit and this eye, it's going to look better as well. Also, please never be afraid to use Liquify on your own art. It's not cheating, it's just a tool like everything else, and it makes everything in digital painting so much more efficient. It isn't like with traditional art where you have to draw everything from scratch. I mean, especially if you want to make money with digital art. Use everything that you have and don't make life unnecessarily hard for yourself. Okay, so the eyes are in 3/4 view, so usually the irises are going to be not as round as in frontal view. Okay, so now I am seeing a fun little detail. You have the reflection of a person, I think, in her eyes, which is cool. Nice idea. So anyway, the irises are going to be a bit more elliptical. And given that they are in 3/4 view, the pupils will move in a bit. So yeah, you've probably seen it in real life. That it's hard to explain the anatomy behind it, but basically I think so. The iris is more or less a little disc inside of the eye, and it just moves differently in space than you would maybe think initially. So yeah, it moves kinda inwards compared to before. So you want this left distance to be smaller than the right one in this case on both irises. That's the idea. And it should look a little bit more realistic this way. We can compare it to before. Okay. For the body proportions, I would also say making... I just noticed this hand needs the guard. Otherwise, that's not a good design for an armor, isn't it? That just distracted me in my thought. So, very sloppy, but I couldn't live with it. Okay, so where was I? I wanted to say that in terms of proportions, I want to enlarge the hands a little bit because they seem very small to me. So with female characters, you can, as a rule of thumb, plan the hand to reach from the chin to slightly above the eyebrows overall. And I think the hands just need a little bit more volume. Just a little bit at least. She will look like a stronger fighter this way too. I mean, she's still like mostly fragile looking, probably compared to a full-on warrior type of character. But she won't look like a cute little fairy compared to other warriors if the hands are cute and tiny. Okay, one thing that I also want to talk about now that we changed the stance is that before all this, the crop looked a little bit slightly awkward in this area on the left because the elbow was just not touching up with the edge of the canvas, and it created like a tangent which distracts the eyes. So in this case, it would be better to have a slight bit more space on the left, or, you know, I think the pose was a bit stiff maybe before anyway. So yeah, I think this all these changes, they add up to a bit slightly better composition. So as I said, the armor is pretty cool. I just noticed that there is, other than the head, we ignore the head because it's just a beauty standard thing that we want to see her face and to be able to identify her in the battle, so to say, as viewers. But given that the armor is so nicely protective, why is there a little gap? It's just, it looks a bit dangerous. Yeah. I mean, if I were to attack her other than the face, I would be going for this neck. So I would consider maybe, putting a little bit of cloth shirt thing here. I mean, a shirt probably isn't going to help much anyway, but it just, I think it makes the look complete in this case. So that's just a suggestion. It doesn't really do much in a fight, but I just think it looks safer. So then a small change would be giving the collar more volume, because you want to be able to rotate your head comfortably if you wear it, I would imagine. I honestly never wore armor like this. It probably is a good exercise for creating it, to actually have one armor, now that I'm thinking about it. But yeah, so I would imagine if you have a little bit more space here, it's probably better in battle, because you can move around more. One little measure I want to do is the shoulder blades. So this one. So her right one is this length, and the other one seems a slight bit longer, given that there isn't... Yeah, it's a little bit, but I don't know. For some reason, it seemed a little bit distracting to me. So I will make this a little bit longer to match it up. Yeah, I think this will do it. It's really a subtle difference, but it's always good to measure these little things, because you have so many details, it's so easy to lose track of them. Yeah, I had the same problem when I drew a manga with a lot of characters who have intricate, armor stuff, and yeah, you always have to make sure that the symmetry is on point. So, flipping the canvas makes it more obvious usually. And if not, seriously, go ahead, make a new layer, just draw a little line thing and move it over to the other side of the body, and you don't even have to think about it anymore. Very simple tool, very effective. Very recommended. Okay, another thing I would like to take a stab at is the hair texture. So you mentioned that you wanted to be more semi-realistic. So my suggestion would be for the hair to make sure that the texture is kind of soft and less geometric, I'd say. So you will have more strands that disperse, and some more complexity by that. You can also add in more transparency. This can also imitate the movement of hair pretty well. So, given that the right part of the hair is moving in the wind, I would also do this on the left to have it consistent in the way that it works with the physics of the world. Also looks more dramatic. I think in general, if you can find any reason to have hair move in the wind, it's always good for most illustrations. It just looks so nice and dynamic. It's just neat, really. Of course, you will get the best result if you look up some references specifically for hair in the wind and work with that. I'm just doing a very rough paint over here. I would say that the types of curves can also be more dynamic. So this, the shape is very tame in the sense that the bend of the curve is mild. It's just, so how you can change this is basically going more towards a circle. I have to redraw it. So the way you achieve this is have it look less horizontal, or less like a line overall, and more like a curve, or like a combination of multiple curves even. And I'd say it's probably good to have some variety in the types of curves, because if you just repeat a certain pattern, it looks unnatural easily. That's always certain danger with these things. I'd also say that if the hair is a little bit more unkempt, it looks more like she has already been in a fight and didn't have time to style it extremely well. I know that this of course depends on the type of story you're telling and like how dire the situation is. So given that you had some orange light, I would apply it on bigger spaces. Just makes the hair feel more like it has a certain area that it covers. So some parts of the hair are pretty much black. This is a bit dangerous in a painting. You usually want to avoid pure black because you can't really define the forms with it. It's always better to stay a little bit above it. And that's usually enough to still have it read as black. You can also easily tint it with some color and give it an undertone, which is also very pleasant. So I think it was a little bit bluish. That's now too light. So this highlight is suddenly quite white compared to the others. I'll tint it with orange as well. With the light situation, I'm a little bit confused because here on the right you have orange light coming in and it seems to affect the face here. But there's also generally more neutral white light, and these two light sources seem to conflict with each other. Yeah, so I would say the orange one is more dramatic. It probably looks way cooler to make this the main light source, and let's say have just skylight for the shadow sides. You can still have very intense reflections because most people probably won't notice if they aren't 100% physically correct. That's no problem. So yeah, I'll try to adjust this. And the first thing I'll do is darken the areas that need to be darker if the right light source is the main light source. I think before the ear was a bit too bright anyway. I'll do it on a separate layer though, just to be safe in case we need to change it up later again. I just changed the shadow color a slight bit because before it just looked too reddish to me. So as you can see, I'm darkening her quite a bit, which will also serve another function overall, to make her stand out from the background and make sure that she reads as a foreground subject, sorry, not object, oops, you know, English. I've been learning it for quite some years, but sometimes in the middle of some sentences, if I don't rehearse stuff, I still stumble upon some grammar stuff. And sometimes it sounds pretty savage. Okay, so let's apply some more light on some areas, because it will have to affect every element that it meets. And given that I tilted the whole spear around and the hands, I will have to change it up a little bit. So for the hair, I'll be doing a little skylight just in some blue, but I'll keep it subtle, and it will help to give some parts more dimensionality. So I'm keeping the white highlights that you had before still, but they just aren't as intense anymore. And I think now it's very clear that the right side is supposed to be where the light comes from in this case. It's also important to make sure that the edge of the face where the light hits is still the brightest part, because the light defines the brightness, and it just it kind of doesn't make sense when next to the light there is a brighter part. So given that you, I think, have a lot of experience with doing manga art. Like a lot of manga artists, a lot of them have a problem with line dependency when they switch to semi-realistic painting, which, yeah, me too, was a big issue for a while. And it can happen that you accidentally outline something even if you don't mean to. But that's all no problem. You can relearn everything for this application of skill. I'm going ahead and really overdo the rim light because it easily serves as a point of interest. I mean, I don't know if it even counts as a rim light if it's from the side, but you hopefully know what I mean. Okay, I just separated the character and the background, and let's do a quick little value check. As you can see, I may have hopefully improved the lighting of the character, but now it's very hard to make them out just in terms of values, which honestly was clearer before because the character was so lightened up. But I'll try some things to get this working again, but with other methods. And hopefully it will also be contributing to the mood of the piece. So what I will try to do with the background is tint the areas that are affected by light with the orange, at least subtly. And I'm doing this with darken, but I'm choosing a darker tone so that it doesn't get too bright. And for the rest, I'll just pick some of these bluish colors, because it might be better if not too much of the light gets dispersed over here. So you see the image immediately turns a lot darker, which I think makes a lot of sense for the subject you chose. So yeah, you know, war is never a beautiful subject. It's not very serene in its nature, so choosing to make it darker is maybe logical and fitting for the occasion. I will reduce the saturation here though, because high saturation in the background can easily compete with foreground characters, which you probably usually don't want. We can still have some light spots here and there that add some contrast. And it makes the scene look more complex than it is. I didn't really add anything to the complexity, but here and there I can make sure that there is contrast around the character, and it helps just to make them stand out more. I'll just experiment with a white layer to just subtly lighten the background. Yeah, it makes it more similar to what you had before, but it's also unifying it more because it is applied roughly. What I will also do is darkening the character some more. And I'll erase it at the spots of where the light hits them, just very roughly. Of course, you can still boost the image with more color if you want to. So I'll try to really bring home the orange in a pretty intense way. And also add something like a brighter light source. Okay, so now we have a very clear direction for it. What you can also try to do is really create light rays. Which is probably a choice you might want to make if it's a glorious moment for the characters. But it's still grim enough in the overall mood. So yeah. This sort of stuff, of course, always depends on what you want to tell with a piece. So it's good to have some sort of story or like a decision for the mood, even if you have no idea for a story. Because it just gives you a clear direction of what you can try to do with your piece. Okay, my light rays are very, very, very rough, but I hope they still show the point well enough. And a very classic tool is the helpful vignette, just to frame the whole image a little bit. Of course, at the end, you can always go ahead and play around with correction layers, just because. It's a tool like everything else. But usually you won't want to mess with it too much and, completely go overboard. We'll just do it subtly. Maybe even turn this one back a bit. Okay, a little detail that you might want to try is making the highlights of the eyes very clear. Because they are quite small and now they don't fit the light direction anymore. Like so, perhaps. Okay, so these are my ideas of what you can try. And if any of those speak to you, feel free to adapt them and show me the result, please. Because I'd find it very awesome to just see what you guys do with the suggestions I give you. Thank you for your submission, and I hope it helped you. If you are an artist too and want to submit a piece for a future Paintover Critique, feel free to do so. You can send it to me on any of my social media channels or per email. Just make sure it's safe for work. You don't have to submit it anonymously like today's artist, but you can also have a shoutout of your social medias. I hope you enjoyed today's video. See you next time. Bye!